In the long and storied history of the European poker tour, few final tables have ever captured the bizarre mix of chaos, comedy, and endurance. Quite like the one that unfolded in Copenhagen in early 2008. What began as a standard poker showdown at Casino Copenhagen evolved into an 8-hour heads-up marathon between two unforgettable characters. Tim Vance, the eccentric American amateur with a flair for theatrics, and Søren Jensen, the fiery Danish pro whose antics were equally legendary. The combination produced one of the most entertaining EPT finals ever filmed, so bizarre and yet so captivating that commentators still talk about it years later. It wasn't the cleanest poker, it wasn't the fastest, but it was pure theater. The setting, Dortmund, January 2008. The stage was set at the Bank EPT event in Dortmund. As usual for televised poker of that era, the table setup featured a suitcase of money and the gleaming EPT trophy displayed dramatically nearby. Occasionally, the camera would zoom out to remind the audience what was at stake. A reminder that for one of these players, this wasn't just a trophy, it was a test of sanity, stamina, and emotional control. As the cameras rolled, something special began to happen. Not necessarily in the cards, but in the characters sitting across from each other. Vance and Jensen were complete opposites, yet perfectly matched for this absurd duel. They talked, joked, needled, and sometimes sang their way through one of the most surreal poker battles ever broadcast. He's going to win the money, sell the trophy, and do what? At one point early in the heads-up, Jensen shouted something in Danish toward his rail. The commentators, led by the ever-calm James Hartigan, weren't sure what he said. Luckily, a Danish-speaking co-commentator was on hand to translate. He said he's going to win the money, sell that ugly-ass trophy on eBay, and then take a chest in the suitcase. Cue the laughter in the commentary booth. That line alone set the tone for what was to come. The entire table dynamic, the crowd's reaction, and the players' total disregard for decorum. It all added up to something uniquely entertaining. This wasn't polished, stoic, GTO-driven poker. This was pure personality on display. The 8-hour heads-up marathon. The final duel between Tim Vance and Søren Jensen would drag on for 8 grueling hours, a record at the time. The fatigue, the frustration, and the absurdity of it all built layer upon layer of tension and humor. Hands blurred together, punctuated by the occasional real action. Out of hundreds of hands played, only a handful featured actual aggression. The rest were slow-rolled, checked down, or punctuated with verbal theatrics. At one point, Vance opened with King 4, and Jensen defended with Queen 10. The flop came 8 of clubs, giving Jensen top pair and Vance a flush draw. What followed was a surprisingly aggressive exchange. Bets, raises, and a snap call. The turn brought the Queen of Spades, giving Jensen top 2 pair. Both players checked, a surprise to the commentary team. And then came the river, a spade, completing Vance's flush. He casually shoved all in, disguising his hand's strength with nonchalance. Jensen called instantly. His top 2 pair was no match for the flush. It was one of the few genuinely well-played hands in the entire match, and Vance celebrated modestly, knowing there were still hours of battle ahead. The madness builds, miscounts, and dumb calls. As the blinds rose and the stacks dwindled, both players grew visibly tired. Logic began to fade. Emotions took over. In one hand, Vance found himself holding King-Queen suited, facing Jensen's pocket kings. Vance stood up, chips awkwardly stacked, visibly struggling to manage both the pressure and his chip tower. When he called a raise he shouldn't have. Even the commentators couldn't help but laugh. Oh, dumb call. Why not pitch that in the muck? I'm tired. I want it done. It was poker burnout at its most relatable. Every player who's been deep in a long tournament could empathize with that exhausted, I just want this overcall. But somehow Vance's loose and unconventional approach kept him alive. Confusion over a bet. One of the most memorable moments of the match came not from a dramatic hand, but from a miscommunication about chip counts. Vance believed the bet was 200,000, while Jensen had actually said 250,000. I looked at him and said, "How much?" He said 200 total. I don't make the call otherwise. He did? He probably would have to reconsider my raise another $150. The floor was called. The decision stood, no takebacks. Jensen wouldn't allow Vance to withdraw his call. 50 for me or 50 for you? You don't mind? No biggie, man. It was the epitome of poker etiquette meeting absurdity. Vance shrugged it off, smiling as though the money didn't matter. The commentators could only marvel at the ridiculousness of it all. The solver says 50,000 more is a fold, one joked, always coming 7. If there was one moment that summed up the entire final table, it was this, the hand that gave birth to the phrase, "It's always coming 7. Vance held King 4, Jensen, Queen 7. The flop brought 6 of clubs, 7 of clubs, King of hearts, top pair for each, but Vance ahead with kings. All the chips went in. The crowd held its breath. The turn came a queen, giving Jensen 2 pair and flipping the script. The commentators groaned. And then, the river? Another 7. Full house, queens, full of 7s for Søren Jensen. It's always coming 7. The phrase would go down in poker lore. Quoted for years afterward whenever a lucky river bailed someone out. Even the commentary team, usually composed and professional, couldn't help but laugh at the sheer inevitability of it. 2 showmen, no villains. What made this final table so unforgettable wasn't just the swings or the misplays, it was the spirit of it. Both players were outrageous, but neither was bitter. Their banter was sharp, but good-natured. They laughed at their mistakes, needled each other, and kept the atmosphere surprisingly friendly for such high stakes. As commentator Joe Stapleton put it, they're both behaving obnoxiously, but they're not mad at each other. That's rare in poker, especially in a final heads-up that's lasted the better part of a workday. Most players would have lost their tempers long before, but somehow Vance and Jensen managed to make it a comedy act instead. The 7-deuce hand. Every great poker story needs a hand of pure nonsense, and this one had it. Vance picked up 7-deuce, the worst starting hand in Texas Hold'em, against Jensen's 10-7. What followed was another round of strange, mismatched aggression. Bets, shoves, folds, and finally, a showdown that left everyone confused. Vance proudly revealed his deuce. I had 2 of them, though. What? You notice I didn't have to pick which one to show, right? It was total nonsense, and yet it was perfect. The commentators were crying with laughter at this point. Then came the kicker. Vance claimed he had a set. A complete lie, since he'd just shown the deuce. It made no sense, but in the delirious atmosphere of the marathon match, logic had long since checked out. 14 hours and a Beatles song. As if the antics weren't enough, there was one more legendary detail. Tim Vance sang the same Beatles song for 14 hours straight. Yes, really. No one could stop him. Not the commentators, not the other players, not the crowd.
The nut flush draw now for Vance on the turn. Jensen still with a 2 pair.
Call.
115 is the bet, just over half pot. Vance.
By the end, it had gone from amusing to maddening to iconic. It was part of the legend now. The final hand. It was nice playing with you, sir. After hours of play, the last hand began quietly. Vance limped with ace of spades, 10 of spades. Jensen checked his option holding 7 diamonds, 2 clubs, a hand that had already starred in this wild heads-up. The flop came 2 clubs, 7 clubs, 8 spades. 2 pair for Jensen, top pair plus backdoor flush potential for Vance. The turn brought the 3 spades, giving Vance the spade draw. Jensen bet 115,000. Vance called. The river landed the 4 spades. Vance's flush was complete, the nuts. "I'm all in," Vance said, calm but certain. Jensen called instantly, then saw the bad news. "It was nice playing with you, sir," Vance added as he turned over the a-high flush. And just like that, after nearly 5 hours of eccentric, emotional poker, Tim Vance was crowned Champion of Copenhagen 2008. He shouted his daughter's name in celebration. Jensen, gracious in defeat, could only smile. And as the booth joked, did not get to defecate in a suitcase. The aftermath, a final table for the ages. Looking back, the 2008 EPT Copenhagen final wasn't about perfect poker. It was about human chaos. It was about 2 players who had nothing left to give, yet somehow kept going. It was about the humor that emerges when fatigue meets competition. And of course, it gave us one of poker's greatest memes, "It's always coming 7." The event has since become a cult classic in poker broadcasting. Commentators often reference it when discussing marathon heads-up matches or eccentric characters. Fans still revisit the highlights, marveling at the blend of drama, absurdity, and heart. Why it still matters. 15 years later, this final table remains a reminder that poker isn't just about solvers, math, or theory. It's about people. Flawed, emotional, funny, unpredictable people. Tim Vance wasn't a pro. He didn't play a perfect game, but he played with passion, humor, and personality. He entertained. And that, in many ways, is what poker needs more of. Søren Jensen, too, brought his fire, humor, and authenticity to the table. Together, they made history, not by creating the most technically impressive match, but by crafting a story that still gets told today. The Legacy of Copenhagen, 2008. Ask any longtime poker fan about the great EPT moments, and this one always comes up. Not for the hands, not for the prize money, but for the sheer spectacle. The laughter, the mistakes, the singing, the wild swings. It was poker as performance art. The editors who cut the highlights into a watchable package deserve equal credit. As one commentator noted, "The editors are the real heroes. They made it completely unrepresentative of reality, but it's great TV." In the end, that's what poker on television is all about, taking a long, exhausting grind and turning it into something electric. And thanks to Tim Vance and Søren Jensen, we got one of the most entertaining final tables ever broadcast, one that to this day remains a fan favorite. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more future videos.